Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dalaran, and in today's video we'll be talking about Covenants in 9.05. Patch 9.05 brought a lot of class changes, legendary changes, and Covenant changes. Majority of these changes focusing on trying to make the options that are looking like the weakest a little bit better, a lot closer to the strongest option, and trying to bridge the gap as best as possible. Vast majority of the Covenant updates that a lot of classes have received were actually really good. Especially with the data that we have, we're able to track just how well players are performing with different class Covenant combos. But not all the class Covenant combos are really strong, so in today's video I wanted to highlight some of the class Covenant combinations, mostly for the DPS specs in the game, for Mythic Pluses as well as in raids, that are severely underperforming or are underperforming in comparison to everything else. But before we dive into the list, there's a bit of caveat. First of all, I had to do a lot of research to put this video together. Technically, there are no bad class Covenant combinations, and we are being very specific when we're talking about this video. There's a reason why in this video we're looking at DPS specs, because when you open up to other roles of different classes like tanks and healers, a lot more Covenants become a lot more useful. And by useful, we are talking about high-end content, as every spec Covenant combo can get your 15 keys done for your KSM, as well as a full castle run for Castle Nathria. So none of the specs are really bad, but we are talking about the high end, the tippity top. How far can players push with these Covenant class combinations in the higher end tier? So we are being very specific. Everything is viable and playable, but when you're talking about the very top, which ones are looking like they're underperforming? The first combo on this video is going to be Warlocks and Venthyr. Doing my research, I found out that obviously Night Fae is a really strong option for Warlocks. Take a look at the Kyrian as well as Necrolord. I actually found that they are not super far behind in comparison to Night Fae. They are slightly not as good in terms of the very high end, but definitely doable, and there's a variety of different players that have had massive success with it either way. The only Covenant that's kind of weak for all three specs of Warlocks right now is Venthyr. But then again, the way that the ability works is a little bit kind of difficult to make it good. Blizzard did buff the Covenant ability slightly to make it a little bit better, and there was a handful of Destruction Warlocks that's able to use that Covenant to do quite well in Mythic Pluses. However, on average, out of all three Covenants, we saw that this one was underperforming by quite a bit. While not a terrible Covenant, it gives Warlocks that much needed mobility. The Venthyr ability just needs a bit of a redesign or a massive tune-up in damage. But I feel like a redesign will probably work better because, as has been told before, the ability itself for some Warlocks feels a bit clunky to use. It has an awesome, amazing animation behind it, but the effect itself and the damage output, I mean, sometimes Warlocks don't even press it in pure single target, and that can definitely be a problem. The next class combo on this list is going to be Retribution Paladins as a Necrolord. Now, the idea of a Necrolord Paladin sounds awesome. It's kind of like weaving a little bit of Necromancer or a Death Knight into the Holy Crusader. But for Retribution Paladins, unless you're Kyrian or Venthyr, there's not a lot of good options. But taking a look at some of the other class DPS combos with Covenants, we found that Retribution Paladin and Necrolord is not really a combo we see a lot, and when we do, we don't really see as much success with it. In fact, actually, even Protection Paladin and Holy Paladin doesn't utilize it as much either, because of the weird wombo combo the ability applies. The damage itself is not that bad for the ability, and it does finally generate a soul shard now, so it's at least somewhat usable. But the wombo combo, letting you activate a baseline ability together with an AoE version of the ability, of course depending on your spec, can be interesting and does work with legendaries, but it just doesn't have nearly the same impact as the other abilities do. For Retribution Paladin, upon using the ability, your next Templar's Verdict activates a free Divine Storm, which can be kind of good in maybe a cleave / single target situation where you want to be able to have some focus damage. But in pure single target, the damage that it offers with Divine Storm is just not really that good, since Divine Storm is an ability you will want to use on multiple targets. Or if, let's say, you do an AoE, it does allow you Templar's Verdict to activate Divine Storm in Mythic Plus AoE situations that could be kind of good, but besides that, that's kind of the only use it has. The other Covenants do have a little bit more of advantage in terms of the versatility of how their abilities can be used for Retribution Paladin as well as the other specs. So maybe if Blizzard wants to give that ability for the Necrolord Paladin a little bit more versatility in one way or another, that could potentially be a really good fix in the future. Another combo that we see a lot less of now is Death Knights and Kyrian. The Kyrian representation for both specs of Death Knights that are DPS, Unholy, and Frost is pretty low, and the success rate of some of the keys that are being done is also not nearly as high. You have Unholy as well as Frost that have an opportunity to play every Covenant in the game, but it looks like the Kyrian one actually ends up being a lot better for tanks. Maybe it's the Sippy Cup that gives you removal of bleeds as well as other deliberating effects. Maybe it's just the damage reduction of the Kyrian and how easily you can spread to enemies. It definitely has some uses, but I just didn't really see as many good numbers as the other Covenants do for Frost and Unholy. At some point, this was actually a very popular choice, for Frost Death Knights in particular, because it allowed you quite a bit of a mastery buff together with your Pillar of Frost. But I guess over time, and with the buffs to the other forms of play, you do see a lot of players trying out different abilities and new things, and players are simply gravitating towards what's simming really good. In fact, Death Knights have quite a bit of variety of Covenants they can run, but we did notice that Kyrian actually had quite a bit of underperforming, particularly from the DPS counterparts. However, if you wanted to play Blood Death Knight at some point, then Kyrian is actually not a terrible choice at all. Next, we have ourselves Windwalker Monks as Venthyr. Now, that is a combo I'm actually exploring right now on my monk, trying it out for myself. Most monks would end up playing something like Kyrian right now. And even taking a look at the Fae and Necrolord, they really are sporting some healthy numbers. But the Venthyr was kind of low. If you were to expand this to Brewmasters as well as Mistweavers, then Venthyr is actually just fine in comparison to all the other Covenants for monks in general, and it's really not that far off in terms of performance. But for Windwalker in particular, it is underperforming by the looks of it, but again, only at the high end. There is some scaling potential with this ability, as the monk images in 905 are made that they'll scale better with gear, so maybe in the future this will be the overpowered choice, like kind of how it was back in the alpha and the beta version of Shadowlands. But as of right now, it doesn't really look like a lot of monks are having some great, amazing success as a Venthyr Windwalker Monk combo. Finally on this list is going to be mages as a Necrolord. Now, if you're on Arcane Mage, Necrolord is actually a really solid choice. However, for this video, we are talking about mages, as in Frost, Fire, as well as Arcane. So taking a look at which Covenants are performing for the class itself as a triple DPS class, we do see that the Necrolord is underperforming for the most part. Now, again, if you are purely Arcane, it's a really solid choice, but just for the other specs, it doesn't work as well, and for obvious reasons. Frostbolt and Fireball are kind of filler abilities that you don't really focus for damage. You kind of press them until you get a proc from those abilities. Unlike for Arcane, that's kind of where a lot of your Arcane Blast, that's majority of your damage. It's your filler, but it's also your prio damage ability. So it makes complete sense in this department as to why it wouldn't work as well, but even just the numbers themselves, overall as a Covenant, are not sporting to be nearly as high. Again, we are going to be seeing a lot of Night Fade, just like with Warlocks, when it comes to mages in terms of what's performing really well. But with this Covenant, it is underperforming by quite a bit, again, only at the high end. If I had to make some suggestions as to what would Blizzard do in order to make this ability better for all mages, is I think it would actually have to buff the damage of Frostbolt and Firebolt by quite a bit for Fire and Frost in order to make it stronger. Or maybe give it other benefits, like moving while casting. Something that's not just a damage increase overall, but gives you extra bonuses to get more players the opportunity to play the Covenant, not just for the damage counterpart. Stuff like that can definitely go a big way in certain raid fights, as well as in certain dungeon environments. But that's going to be our video for some of the, I guess, weaker class Covenant combinations for DPS classes in Shadowlands patch 905 so far. Blizzard has done a lot of good work with Covenants, and again, if we were to expand this list for tanks as well as healers, there's a lot of good options in terms of what Covenants you could run. But when you're looking at DPS specifically, there are some outliers that are underperforming slightly. But then again, we did talk about all these combos are viable for 15s for KSM as well as Heroic Nathria, but if you're trying to push content, then that's where you might run into a bit of a sitch. But thank you guys so much for watching this video. I do hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts about all these Covenants and what do you think Blizzard could do to fix them all. Do you think just more damage is going to be good, or maybe a complete redo and rework for these Covenants? And what do you think those reworks should be in the comments down below? Thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts about this video, and as always, I'll see all of you guys in another one.